Good morning. That's a good one. Good afternoon, everyone. So we'll just move into the agenda. Item 1.1, declarations of interest and transparency statements. Does anybody have any? Colin.
Just for transparency. Yeah, I'm a member of Iton Cycle Club, and we are recipients of some of the one of the projects that Nestrans are funding. But if there's any votes or anything, I'll abstain from those.
Thank you. And Ian.
Thanks, Chair. This is a transparency statement. I am a member of the board of NHS Grampian, which is referred to at various points throughout the report pack, and in particular in items 4.1, 4.2, 5.2 and 7. Having considered the objective test, I don't believe it's necessary to withdraw in relation to any of those items, and so, as I said, this is the transparency statement.
Thank you. I'm not seeing anyone else with transparency statements in the room or online. So I'll move on. Item 1.2, minute of the previous board meeting. Are we happy to agree that? I'm taking the silence as a yes. Okay. Yep. Item 1.3, minutes of the Nestrans Appointments Committee. Oops, Alan, do you want to?
No, it's on 1.3.
Yes, 1.3. So yes, 1.3, and Alan, I know wants to make a correction.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon. It's a correction in relation to the transparency statement that's been reported in the minute. What it says there is by virtue of myself knowing applicant 4. The transparency statement I made at the time was it was by virtue of the fact that I had worked for the same employer as the candidate for a large number of years, but I didn't actually know the candidate, therefore would stay and participate. So I have supplied alternative wording to the Chair and Mr. Finch. So I've asked that that's taken into account. That's in line with what I said during the actual meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, and I'm happy for that to be corrected or otherwise noted. Are we otherwise happy to agree the minutes from 1.3? Agreed. Thank you very much. We don't have a presentation, so we'll move on to budget matters. 3.1 is the 25-26 annual audit, and I will pass over to Tina for.
She's online.
Online. I couldn't see her in the table.
Thank you, Chair. I'm pleased to present the audited annual accounts and the audit report for 24-25. The audit report presents a very positive outcome for Nestrans. The auditors have raised only one recommendation, and all previous recommendations have now been closed. Subject to the usual final checks, they expect to issue an unmodified opinion on the financial statements. This clean bill of health confirms the strength of the financial management and governance. Members are asked to approve the annual accounts for signature, approve the management response to the recommendation, and to note the audit report and its positive conclusions. And with Chair's permission, please could I pass to Cathy Smith from Grant Thornton, who also wishes to speak on the report. Thank you.
Yes, please. Thank you.
Thank you. Hello, everyone. By way of introduction, so I am Cathy Smith. I'm one of the managers at Grant Thornton. I'm also the manager for the Aberdeenshire Council audit. Angela was intending to be here today to present this report, but unfortunately hasn't been able to make it, so I'm stepping in for today. Hopefully I'll be able to answer any questions. I'm going to take the report as read, and I'm just going to point out some of the key points. I won't discuss everything, and then I'm happy to take any questions at the end. In terms of materiality, on page 8, the materiality has changed from the materiality that was communicated earlier in the year in our audit plan. This is only because in the audit plan, we calculated the materiality based on last year's figures, and then when we got a revised set of accounts, a draft set of accounts for audit, we re-looked at the materiality based on the new figures and determined that the expenditure that materiality is based on had moved sufficiently from last year to update the materiality. The calculation is still the same, so it's still based on 2.5% of gross expenditure, and performance materiality is still based at 75%. So none of that has changed, and the materiality for the remuneration report is still set at £25,000. So no change other than just to scale it for the new expenditure. During our audit planning, we identified 3 significant risks. These were management override of controls, the valuation of the benefit pension scheme, the potential risk of fraud in revenue expenditure, and an other risk, but not significant, was recognised in relation to IFRS 16, which was a new standard coming in this year and changed the way that leases were going to be treated. So with that being new, we recognised a risk there. The work has all been complete, as Tina said. We didn't find any issues with any of the management override of controls, so this was looking at journals. Didn't find any issues there. We also didn't find any issues with the fraud in expenditure recognition risk. We did have a look at the pensions, so similar to in previous years, the pension asset this year has exceeded pension liability, which is unusual, and is exceeded by 1.4 million. And in line with IFRIC 14, which is the standard that looks at how much of that asset can actually be recognised, this was then capped down to nil. There was a slight error, £34,000 in the disclosure, not on the financial statements themselves, but in the disclosures to the pensions. There was a £34,000 error, which was just to do with the fact that the initial set of accounts were based on a report that used estimated data earlier in the year. And then when the updated report came with the true data, it just hadn't been updated. So not a particularly big issue. In terms of the IFRS 16, again, there were some minor changes just to some of the presentation in the disclosures, but no issues with the financial statements themselves, which is a very positive result given that it's a new standard. So it's very new to everybody. And there were some other minor disclosure changes, but as Tina said, there were no adjustments to the financial statements themselves. In terms of wider scope, so Nestrans is classified as a less complex body, and that's just based on the level of expenditure. So we did work looking at financial sustainability, and we did work looking at the annual governance statement. In terms of all prior year recommendations, as Tina said, they were all closed in year. Nestrans have developed a medium-term financial strategy this year, which was one of our recommendations from the previous year, so that's very positive. There is a follow-up recommendation, which is just to have a look at some of the assumptions that have been used in that medium-term financial strategy, particularly around inflationary increases that you might expect to see over the next few years. But overall, that is very positive. In terms of best value, we concluded that there were adequate arrangements, no significant issues raised there. And then just finally on our fee, so the fee for the year is £14,300, and that does include an additional fee of £1,500, which is to cover the extra work on the IFRS 16 that I mentioned on the leases, that new standard that came in, just requiring some extra work on that with it being new. I'm happy to take any questions that there might be at that point, and hopefully I'll be able to answer them.
Thank you very much. I'm not seeing any hands either online or in the room. Are we happy to agree the report and the recommendations that we have in front of us? Yep, thank you very much. And item 3.2, we'll move on to budget matters, and I'll pass on to Jenny. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. This report is to provide the board with the usual update on 25-26 budget monitoring and to consider any issues that may arise. Appendix 1 sets out a summary statement of income and expenditure, and this shows spend to the end of September of just over 1.2 million. The forecast outturns are also shown and have been updated to reflect some projects being led by the councils that are known to be coming in under budget or not progressing this financial year, and this is the basis for the variants that are being proposed. Appendix 2 gives a more detailed breakdown of the spend to date against the individual projects being funded via the People in Place grant, along with the grant income that had been received by end of September. Due to some project-specific variances that have been confirmed, a number of environment proposals have been developed in partnership with council colleagues and are presented in Appendix 3 for consideration to maximise delivery using this year's budget. The recommendations are that the board notes the monitoring position and forecast presented in Appendix 1, notes the monitoring position and forecast for the People in Place projects presented in Appendix 2, and approves the environments proposed in Appendix 3. And I'm happy to take any questions on this report. Thank you.
Thank you much, Sandra.
Thanks very much. I'd like to ask on the Appendix 1, what does non-core rechargeable refer to?
Apologies. Nestrans have commissioned the Travel Know-How Survey on behalf of all regional transport partnerships. And so because we have the contract, we get the bill from Shona Drummond Marketing and we recharge it to the other RTPs.
And can I ask also on that appendix, why is it that we don't put in any budget lines when we're setting our budget for example, under the Aberdeen Rapid Transit City Region deal, but then of course we always have some sort of, or we are most likely to have some out of thought expenditure against it, and I just wondered what the reason for that was.
It's because it's a rechargeable cost that's refunded through the City Region deal. So Nestrans manages the work and incurs the expenditure, but then we recharge it, so it's no net cost. There's no Nestrans budget involved, but the expenditure and income will be shown as they arise, because every quarter we completely recharge all the expenditure that we've incurred.
I see, thank you. And on the wiring of funds, I note in the city two big environments one towards the Union Street Central and one for the beachfront. So if we are not able to do the work in the other projects that were listed there in Aberdeen City this year, and so we said, well, we can't do these things, but we can do this, and maybe I'm looking at Claire as well. What happens next year? These the projects that are not done come back into the pot, I guess. But do they then come out? Do we ever claw any of that 200,000 back from Union Street Central or 200,000 back from Beach Master Plan?
Thanks through you, convener. In terms of the underspend on those particular projects, Councillor MacDonald, we do try and limit this as much as we possibly can. When we submit proposals to Nestrans for approval at the start of the budget setting process, we have very detailed conversations with project officers, project managers, to make sure that spend profiles are agreed up front, so that there is as much certainty as possible in terms of when drawdowns will be made throughout the year, aligned with project goals and milestones. Unfortunately, just with the way life is, construction issues, resource issues with the council, there are unforeseen issues that inevitably come up every year with projects. Certainly within Aberdeen City, this unfortunately has happened for the last few years. It's something that we are mindful of. In terms of additional projects to go forward for budget setting proposals, officers always take a view as to the best external funding source to ask for funding from, based on the timeline that projects are likely to be. So we have Scottish Government funding that City Council officers apply for. We have Nestrans funding, and obviously there are some instances where council funding comes directly as well. So it is a fine balance in terms of which projects go to which funding pots. Unfortunately, there are unforeseen issues, particularly in these projects this year, so that that proposal to reallocate the spend is in front of members today.
Yeah, I get all that and I understand why we do that. But what I'm not understanding is that these huge big projects which are worth you know, millions and millions and millions are getting this funding from the pot. And I suppose two parts of it is and they probably need it. But when we go then into next year, would they have within the way it works, would they have a surplus that could then go back into small projects? You know, the other things that haven't, or there may be other projects. It's just not clear to me if that's possible or not. Like a clawback, I suppose.
Yeah. Thank you, through you, convener. In terms of the budgets for those individual projects, I could certainly ask for more detail from the Chief Officer of Capital in terms of if because Nestrans funding is likely to be reallocated depending on what boards agree today, if there is an underspend in relation to where what money would have been used instead, is I suppose your question. What would happen to that money? My expectation is it would just go back into the pot. It would be its capital, but I can certainly ask for the Chief Officer of Capital to confirm that.
Thank you.
Yeah, I think this is maybe something we could discuss later as well, because it's something that's come up over and over again. Because some of these projects, we don't really know when they started. Some of them we've fired money over and over again, and we should be monitoring that properly. And we can't, because we only see an annual figure for things. And, so I do think we should be able to scrutinise it more. And I think that's something that we should look at during our workshop later on. And actually, I thought it was mainly force.
No, I'm sure we can. I'm sure that can be taken to the workshop. Do you have any? Do you have any more questions or anything else to cover? And if not, we're happy to agree this report with its recommendations. Agreed. Thank you very much. And I'll pass over to Paul now for the director's report.
Thank you very much, Chair. Director's report just runs through some strategic issues that aren't otherwise covered on the agenda, including liaison with the regional transport partnerships, Transport Scotland and Scottish Government. The liaison with Transport Scotland over the last couple of months, a lot of that has been a sequence of meetings that have been had around about the evolving policy on car use reduction policy in Scotland. And you'll recall that we did specific research on the 20% vehicle kilometre reduction and how meaningful or how achievable that was in the northeast of Scotland in different contexts. Obviously, within the city and urban context, there are certain objectives in rural areas that can be have its own challenges as well. I think the key thing is that after the papers were published, Transport Scotland last week published a revised target which focused a lot more strongly on the ultimate aim of carbon reduction within the transport sector, rather than necessarily zeroing in on car kilometre reduction. Kilometre reduction does form an element of it, but the headline is around that carbon reduction things. I will be anticipating bringing a paper with more detail on that to the February board, so we can discuss how that means and what that means for the northeast of Scotland, both the urban context and also the rural context as well. I think it's also relevant to understand that Transport Scotland are also creating a new directorate at the moment, looking at transport and connectivity. And I think one of the things that directorate will be looking at is a fresh look on policy aspects around public transport and how public transport funding is happening in Scotland as well. So I think that's an opportunity to influence that work as well, because we know the issues that we have, particularly with rural transport and connectivity, as much as the ongoing work we have with BSIPs, etc., in the urban areas. We're also working with Transport Scotland on some interesting work understanding the impacts of energy investments in this area, and that's transmission on and offshore wind, battery storage, and how that's impacting on the strategic network and some of the constraints on that one as well. So that'll be kicking off shortly. We had an RTPs meeting on the 5th of November. The next meeting is with the chair down in Dumfries, with both myself and Councillor Archerson planning in attendance. Just so that Nestrans are doing a summit the following day as well, which we hope to attend as well. We're very active in the realm of community planning at the moment, both in the city and the Shire, and helping to make sure we have those strategic linkages on the transport aspect, both in the city and the Shire, as they work through their new lights. The rest of the report highlights the work we're doing in Health and Transport Action Plan, Bus Alliance, road safety, the Regional Economic Partnership, and the Get About programme going forward. At the previous board, which I wasn't able to attend, there was a discussion about the Nestrans annual report. Having considered the discussion at that point and discussed with officers and those in attendance, the proposal would be, because of the statutory and fairly fixed nature of what we have to supply to our major stakeholders, and understanding the sentiment of the discussion, is to produce a 4 to 6 page summary document of the highlights of the year, and to use that to highlight key achievements, issues, and the forward look beyond the report as well. And we would use this summary document as a basis for wider stakeholder engagement and dissemination and communications. We're still, Lucy has kicked off the drafting of that document. I don't have that document to share today. We would anticipate working through that up before the end of the calendar year. And if I would seek to approve that with the chair and the vice chair, and take it from there. Obviously, if the board would want to see that as well, that can be built into that approvals process going forward, if the board are comfortable with that proposal. We've also listed some of the work we're doing with conferences and seminars and press and communications as appendices to this report. Thank you very much, Chair. Happy to take questions.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions, Sandra?
Yep, thank you. Do we have any
Microphone.
Sorry.
Do we have any idea when we think the Regional Economic Partnership Strategy Action Plan will see the light of day?
I understand that they're programming that for the first quarter of next year. There are, I think, there's a working group, there's a board, there's interaction between the two. We're part of the officer group on that one, feeding information through. The discussions I'm having is, whilst they welcomed the most recent update was given to the board came back with further questions and clarifications they'd like to see. So there is a process, there is engagement on that one. In terms of transport, I've been very bold about the regional ask of what we've been looking for across the region and the total investment that requires. But obviously, it's not just about transport. There's a whole manner of other issues in that action plan to do with development, tourism, etc., etc. So yeah, there are aspects in there which may be the hold up or the point for further development.
And you mentioned the Transport Scotland's new directorate that they're setting up. Do you think that's going to, is that really being driven by the taking ScotRail into public ownership, or is that going to be a focus, or will it be predominantly buses, do you think?
From my understanding, I think across Transport Scotland, I think the focus will be on more public transport and getting better integration across the different, dare I say, silos within Transport Scotland, particularly with bus-based public transport, but also looking at the integration of there. So I think the franchise operation for ScotRail will very much stay within the rail directorate, but I think this is a new opportunity to improve the relationship and the interrelationships between the different modes, by also understand they have a focus on public transport futures and understanding how that might evolve going forward. Just because there's an awful lot of money at the moment being dedicated to concessionary fares of £350 million annual revenue across Scotland in terms of supporting that, and there's other support that's going to the bus industry as well. Now, that is achieving really good things across the whole of Scotland, but obviously there is that's such a large amount of money that they want to make sure that that's working effectively across the whole of the regions of Scotland. And obviously great if you've got an access to the bus, but obviously if you don't have access to a bus, then you're missing out on some of those benefits as well. So I think there's those sorts of discussions going on as well, but early days yet.
Chair was on the Bus Alliance notes, and in number 5 it says that there's a look towards creating improved stopping facilities on Guild Street. So I'm assuming that it might be prudent to wait until we hear the outcomes of the judicial review that took place yesterday, which I understand won't be until the new year. But I don't expect that the shovels will be in the ground that soon to get revised stopping places in Guild Street. If it does mean, or I suppose my question is, will it mean actually digging up and doing things, or is it just moving bus stops and the like?
Thank you, through you, Chair. There is a report programmed for the February Finance and Resources Committee within the City Council to report back on that funding that has been allocated.
Oh, that's very helpful. Thank you.
I'm not seeing any other hands either in person or online. Are we happy to? Oh, sorry, Colin. Sorry.
Yeah, just a quick about the Road Safety North East Scotland group. So the meeting was on the 28th of August. I'm just having a quick look to see when the next meeting is for that. Just on the basis that a few weeks ago there was a notice about the casualties in Aberdeen and Aberdeenshire going upwards rather than downwards. Was there any discussion about that, about what if there were any particular reasons for that, or what's happening with that?
Thank you, through you, Chair. Thanks for the question, Colin. So the next meeting is tomorrow. And as part of that, we ask for regular stats updates from our colleagues in City Shire, and we also include Moray Council in this, so it's the full Division A area. We also get support from Police Scotland in understanding causation, particularly around fatalities. Unfortunately, there is no single identifiable cause. It's human beings, unfortunately. And we continue to work with our colleagues in Police Scotland around about the in-depth fatality review they conducted previously, and really being quite data-driven and data-led in where interventions are focused. Tomorrow we'll be discussing the Winter Road Safety Campaign, whereby Nestrans and the 3 constituent local authorities are putting in money for additional police time, essentially, to support officer deployment. And that's going to be using things like speed compliance data to identify routes across the region whereby we know that there's risk. So I don't have a definitive answer as to why, and that is really frustrating, but it remains a priority for that group. And we recently re-established the operational group to give that really delivery focus side of things and to encourage collaboration across all relevant partners.
Thanks, Caroline. Yeah, I mean, it's just, I was just wondering if there was a particular, this year it was going in the wrong direction from what on the way we were wanting to go. And I guess the other thing that goes along with that, and that's been recently, is obviously the introduction in some towns and cities of the 20 mile an hour. How, in Wales, when they had good evidence, or not evidence, but they had good figures that said that after a year of operation of that 20, it's saved something like 100 fatalities and serious injuries. Are we going to be able to collect the same information because of the sporadic way we've implemented this?
Unfortunately, those fatalities don't happen in the 20 mile an hours. The fatalities happen on single carriageway rural routes, and for our colleagues in Moray, it's mainly on the A96. So while the 20 mph can be instrumental in improving perception of safety around about active travel. That's not to minimise the road safety impact it does have in built up urban areas. What we do know is where these fatalities are happening is on our rural routes. And that is the challenge given the size of the network.
Thank you. On that, it just reminded me, do you discuss at that meeting, or is there any data around the propensity for people to be using their mobile phones whilst driving? I don't know if anybody else read about it, but I read yesterday, and you can't really tell if it's true or not because it's on social media, it's on your phone, but it shocked me. A woman in Illinois, however you pronounce it, in America, who was driving, doing a TikTok video at the time and killed somebody. But I've certainly personally not so much seen people doing it, but noted that people sometimes take longer to take off at lights and so on, which I kind of always attribute to them being on their looking on their phones. But is there any data around that?
Thank you, through you, Chair. We don't have exact data from Police Scotland, though I can find out about successful stops that have been made by colleagues in Police Scotland. What we do know anecdotally is that what our colleagues in road policing will tell us is if they see someone weaving about, perhaps is the best way to describe it, on a road, they don't automatically assume that it is alcohol or drugs involved, that it is in fact phone usage. What we're looking to now is deployment of technology, so that our cameras available that can detect phone use, and they also use HGVs, whereby the elevated position of an HGV cab allows for sight into obviously the driving environment, so it's detecting that. But if it's helpful, I can make inquiries as to specific data around that, and we could discuss that with police colleagues at our meeting tomorrow. Should that be helpful?
Thank you.
Yeah, that's really interesting because a lot of us, you don't need to have your phone in your hand anymore. It's all there on your screen, and even WhatsApp comes up and sends me a message and asks and then asks if I want to reply, which I don't do. Don't do. But so I don't know how you tackle that because it's just as distracting. But I have driven in meetings. I will, but I'm not participating. Honest, just listening.
I think some of this is around positive behaviour change messaging and emphasising what's traditionally been known as the fatal five in terms of the human behaviours that contribute towards fatalities on our road network. And that can be across aligning with the safe system approach, which aligns with Road Safety Framework 2030 and what our colleagues in Police Scotland are working towards in that Vision Zero strategy. And unfortunately, it's human behaviour, and that is one of the most challenging things.
Well, it might be, but that facility is there in your car to use, and maybe that's what's wrong, rather than, I mean, it's quite hard not to use it when it's actually there. It's not having that facility is probably the best way ahead, really. I mean, maps are maybe okay because I don't know whether maps are okay or not, but it stops you don't have to stop and read a map. Or you don't have to look at the map in the passenger seat of the car, or in dangerous activities like that. But is it the modern equipment that we need to look at rather than just driver behaviour?
I know from previous road safety work that I undertook in my role before this that yes, in-car technology is incredibly challenging, but ultimately we're looking at legislation on a much bigger level than even the local level, and it's the car manufacturers that really need to lead the way around about this, unfortunately. And we try through behaviour change, through positive messaging, our colleagues in Road Safety Scotland, using those national campaigns highlighting the risk around phone usage.
Thanks, Isabel. Thanks, Chair. Isabel makes a very interesting point, but I'm not absolutely convinced that controlling the technology available in the car is the way to deal with it. Ultimately, it's down to driver behaviour, because even my little Micra has the ability to go over 70 miles an hour and that's my behaviour that ensures that doesn't happen. The same way as a driver, I have a responsibility not to ficker with the technology while I'm supposed to be driving, whether that's my phone or choosing a new playlist on the in-car entertainment. I mean, I always, sorry, it's going down a rabbit hole now, but I always, when I was a little Ian, I remember my mother telling my dad, who had the first car they'd had that had a radio in it, that he wasn't to be distracted by the radio while he was driving, that he shouldn't listen to the radio while he was driving, she told him. And obviously that's now just an accepted thing. But I think ultimately it's down to our behaviour. And yeah, there's a place for legislation, but I don't believe legislation will solve the problem. It's down to that cultural change and that change in behaviour so that we drive responsibly. Sorry, rant over.
Yeah, very interesting discussion. One thing I will say, just maybe it's my driver behaviour, but I jump from one car to another. And usually when I'm stopped at traffic lights and it takes me a second to get going again, it's because I've forgotten the engine's actually stopped and then I've got to push, I've got to get it to start, you know, and then move, as opposed to the other one, it keeps going. So age doesn't come easy at times. I think the question I've got is against on road safety. I'm just wondering, are we looking at like a general trend? And the thing that always concerns me a little bit is obviously e-bikes. And, you know, I'm used to traditional bikes. They come up at you, and you can see them coming. But I've seen occasions where, you know, these things, they're going at speed and they come right down in between you, and you generally just don't notice them until the last seconds. And I'm just wondering, just on that, are we looking at anything, or is there any kind of trend we're seeing in terms of accidents involving them?
Through you, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Turner. Yes, so Police Scotland, we've asked them to separate out the data around collisions in terms of electric motorcycles. And you'll perhaps recall that there was a quite a serious incident on Westburn Road. What our senior colleagues in Police Scotland will tell us is that these bikes are used exclusively for two things. One is antisocial behaviour, the second is serious and organised crime. And community policing teams are equipped with sprays that they can spray the individual with, but then I understand from sergeant level that the actual trouble that they have then is identifying the correct individual, because unfortunately these young men all look quite identical. But we do ask specifically for a breakdown of those statistics, and we're not seeing significant numbers in terms of serious injury. It's more those community level reports and the challenge for community policing teams in tackling that. So what we speak about at the Road Safety North East Scotland meetings is that interconnection between the roads policing colleagues and their community policing teams to try and have a joint approach at addressing this. Apologies, that's not the best answer, but that's the most information I can give at the moment.
No, it's absolutely fine. I was just curious, you know, it's sad. I mean, I still, as a driver, I still see, you know, a lot on our roads where people just don't allow enough space for bicycles, etc. And some of it is there's an oncoming car and they think, well, we'll just, we'll overtake and get so that way we're not held up. And it's terrible, but at the same time, that's the one that actually does concern me. Some of the, you've focused on motorcycles. I'm just focused on powered bicycles at times, you know, in terms of the, from that. And I've seen them appear very late, you know, when you're at roundabouts and everything. And I'm just curious just on the figures. That's all.
Just as a point, a powered bicycle is not going to go any faster than a non-powered bicycle. It's a powered motorcycle that are unrestricted that you have the issues with, and they are motorcycles, they're not bikes. No, they're not legal.
Having covered that, do we have any more questions? We're happy to agree the report and recommendations. I'm hearing agreed, so I'll go with that. 4.2, so I'm jumping ahead of the number. Public sector reform information, 24-25. I'm just going to take that as read and ask if anyone has any questions. Yep, Don.
Thank you, Chair. very informative report, so thanks for that. One concern I had, obviously we're looking at year 24-25 for achievements, partnership working projects. What I noted is that there is no rail projects mentioned within the report, so everything is based around active travel, buses, roads, etc. And there's nothing there on rail unless I missed something. I just wondered if, you know, there's a reason why in 24-25 there hasn't been a conclusion of any projects on rail. Thanks.
It might be hidden, but Aberdeen to Lawrence Kirk multimodal study included the local rail stations at Newton Hill and Cove as part of that. As part of that particular aspect, and some of the rail work that we do is about working in partnership with ScotRail and Network Rail, and doesn't necessarily come through the Nestrans books in terms of where the study is funding from or where our input goes to. It doesn't always come through the Nestrans books as a particular study. But I think during that period of time, and just going a quick look through there, we did, you know, that was that strategic piece of work in that area as well. Some of the work we did on the regional active travel work, no, sorry, that's that one as well. Again, and just casting my mind back as to some of the work that was undertaken as well. We were also looking at some of that wider work we did with the Chamber of Commerce on the corridor work, combined, looking up to Peterhead, Ellen, Fraserburgh, which was jointly looking at road junctions as well as that wider term connectivity piece as well. So it was in there, but perhaps it doesn't say rail writ large across the project title.
Yeah, I wondered, so it says payments in excess of 25,000, but the actual list seems to have a lot of payments that are less than 25,000, and I wondered what the reason for that was.
It's cumulative value. It's the cumulative value. If that exceeds 25,000, you have to list each and every one, the component parts.
Understood. Thanks.
I'm not seeing any other hands. Are we happy to agree that paper? Yep, I'll take that as a yes then. Thank you. And we'll move on to 5.1, the Aberdeen City Region update. And I'm just going to pass on to Claudia for that.
Thank you, Chair. This report provides an update on the strategic transport components of the Aberdeen City Region deal, with a particular focus on the strategic transport appraisal workstream. It outlines progress across a range of projects, including the cumulative transport appraisal to inform the development of the local development plans for both Aberdeen City and Aberdeenshire councils, infrastructure projects such as the ongoing work around the A90, A952, the development of regional network of mobility hubs, and specifically the work in relation to the Balata Mobility Hub and some freight transition initiatives. The report also highlights newly approved studies addressing the transport impacts of the energy transition, something Paul was mentioning earlier, and future demand scenarios in key corridors, as well as non-car-based connectivity in the Mearns area. A separate update on the Aberdeen City Region, Aberdeen Rapid Transit Programme will be introduced by my colleague Claire MacArthur, providing providing further detail on recent engagement activities. And board is asked to note the progress on the outline projects, and also sought to delegate authority to the partnership director to award contracts for the several forthcoming studies, ensuring continued momentum and alignment. Thank you.
Thank you. With apologies to board, I'm actually going to hand over to Mrs. Chalmers, who's online, who is the ERT lead. I believe she'll be able to give the information in a much better way than I can.
I'll do my best. Thanks, Claire. Yeah, just a quick update on the Aberdeen Rapid Transit project. I think I updated verbally at the last meeting that the strategic business case was approved by the City Region Deal Joint Committee in September. So the report just confirms that. And I'm pleased to say that Stantec has now been commissioned to develop the programme level outline business case, and that work started in earnest in September just following on immediately from that approval. The focus at the moment on activities really has been around governance and progression of designs, scoping out the joint network review, which has a sort of parallel to the development that's work that's ongoing through the Bus Alliance on the bus service improvement partnership plan. But the main area of activity over the last couple of months has been a public engagement exercise. We went and we launched a public engagement on ART, the vision for ART and the outcomes of the strategic business case. On the 30th of September. That just closed on Friday, just past the 7th of November. So I can give a brief update of the activity that we undertook, but obviously we're still in the process of just collating all of that data and undertaking the analysis of what that engagement's actually told us. But just in summary, we held 4 in-person drop-in events across the region at Forrester Hill, Bonaccord Centre, the City Centre at West Hill and Portlethen. We held 1 public online engagement event. We've also had online engagement events with ACT UP group, which is the Active Travel and Public Transport stakeholder group within the City Council. We've had events with young children, young people, and the primary sort of source of engagement was an online engagement portal with a survey that was hosted on both City Council and Aberdeenshire Council's engagement portals. We've supported all of that with social media posts, press releases, and posters across the region to try and advertise the survey and all the drop-in events that we had. We've also distributed a lot of that information and the media assets to a wide range of stakeholders that we'd already engaged with across the region, and they were able to help us with distribution via their own internal comms and social media. We had Paul very kindly did a section on the Our Union Street podcast, and we've also had, in parallel to the public engagement survey, a proactive market research activity, which is really asking all the same survey questions, but to a statistically representative sample of the population across the North East. So what we're doing now is we'll collate or analyse all of the results of the engagement to provide a more detailed report back, and we'll bring a more detailed report back on that to the Nestrans Board in February. But in summary, we've had around about 450 face-to-face engagements, just under 600 survey responses, and 1,200 responses to the market research. So I think in the context of transport engagements that we've done, that's a reasonably successful response rate. We've also had a high level of press interest in the engagement, with Press and Journal attending and reporting on all the in-person events and the online events, plus a roundup article. So I would say a reasonable level of interest in the project overall. But we'll do more detailed analysis and bring back a full report on what that's actually telling us, to be able to feed into the technical work and future engagement as we go on. I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Sandra.
Yeah, thanks very much for that update. Look forward to that in February. From my very non-analytical perspective, I thought it was a bit of a mixed bag from the reports in the press and so on. So we'll wait and see what the actual data comes back like. But there were some very good positives, as well as maybe some maybe people who are not so keen on the idea. But no, in my view, it was good. I think the coverage was excellent from the Press and Journal point of view, and well done.
I'm not seeing. Obviously, Don.
Just a quick question, and sorry, it's another rail one. At 3.8, we've got the rail freight terminals review, and I note that there was some works done back in 2023, but there's no immediate requirement for further options development. Thinking about freight and trying to encourage companies to use rail rather than road, there is that argument that we do need to look into the potential of extending sidings so that it makes it actually financially viable for companies to use that option. So although it's saying here that further work will come pending the outcome of other work streams, do we have an idea of what those work streams are, when they are going to be coming to us, and if that can be progressed at all?
Yes, a good question, and an ongoing issue. The work we did a few years ago identified potential options for the extension of the sidings at Craig Inches, and also highlighted the importance of achieving gauge clearance along the track leading up to that, so you can get larger, wider containers. The work at Craig Inches is also dependent on potential future master planning activity that may or may not occur in and around East Tullis as well, which is also pending at the moment in terms of some of the work that's going on. So there's a number of actual uncertainties, which probably mean that if we pressed ahead in any one particular direction without having clarity on some of those aspects, we might end up doing work that's abortive or not a thing. So I think this is a case that work might fall out of the window of potential funding of the City Region deal, although the work to do it would still be affordable within other budget headings as well. So that will be my wording. But we continue to engage, and I think the work that we are doing on that wider policy piece in terms of the regional impacts of strategic of regional of energy transformation will pick up on that potential for rail freight potential and how that can help. So I think that discussion will still be coming through. Just that particular work stream that we've highlighted there is probably more specifically location specific on that rail freight terminal to the south of Aberdeen at this moment. But we keep in touch with interested players in there to see how that may well play out.
Thanks, Chair. It's an apology. I was so fixated on covering all the bases in relationship to my membership with NHS Grampian that I forgot two other transparency statements. So, it's a transparency statement, Chair. I'm a member of the Aberdeen City Region Deal Joint Committee. So can I make it in relation to item 5.1, and it also gets some mentions elsewhere in the reports. So that's a transparency statement. And also the Regional Economic Partnership has been mentioned once or twice. I'm a member of the Regional Economic Partnership. And again, that's a transparency statement. I don't believe it's necessary to withdraw. And again, my apologies for not making those declarations at the start, or those transparency statements at the start. As you will know, Chair, I am rather fixated on declaring my NHS Grampian board at almost the drop of a hat.
In respect of the recommendations, could you just remind me, someone, what the discretionary level that the director has at the moment to go ahead with contracts? I would say, from memory, I was thinking 50,000, but and these are all obviously over that. But does anybody know?
Yeah, so the existing financial regulations, which are currently being worked on and updated by our colleagues in Aberdeenshire Council, state that is £50,000 at that particular point. Above that, it is then up beyond that, it is a case of where the board has been advised and approved as per the wording of this going forward. I guess the other safeguard I've put in here is actually specifically reference approval from the Treasurer and the procurement officers as well, which actually comes from the expediency line of the financial regulations as well.
Yeah, that's helpful. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm not seeing any more hands in person or online. Are we happy to agree that? And we'll move on to this time 5.2 People in Place programme, and I'll pass on to John.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Chair. The purpose of this report is to update members on Q2 progress of the People in Place programme and seek approval from board of our plans for 26-27. Some projects are listed by way of example highlights. The first point I'd make is that I could easily have listed several other projects in the paper. Those are not the only highlights. All the projects are working towards their respective objectives. In relation to the in-person showcase event in Ellen on the 15th October, which some members attended, feedback that I've had has been positive, but it's my intention to share a survey with all those who attended and those who could make it on the day seeking ideas for how the next event to be held in Aberdeen in early March might work even better. That survey will include the copies of the presentations from the speakers on the day, and a save the date for the Aberdeen event will be circulated as soon as I can. In respect to 26-27, Transport Scotland have confirmed that the scope of the programme remains as is and have shared a draft timeline with Nestrans for when the various steps are expected to be implemented. Like last year, we don't know yet what specific monies Nestrans will be receiving, so we propose to plan for around where we're at this year. Having taken on board feedback throughout the year, and indeed throughout last year, from partners, Transport Scotland, our independent assessor, the anonymised commonplace survey that went out to all partners, and our own thoughts, that is Nestrans and our local authority colleagues, on what has worked and what has worked well and what might be improved. It's our intention to operate broadly similar, but hopefully slicker, I'm looking at myself when I say that, process to publish, assess, and make decisions upon which projects will be supported. For example, if approved today, our invitation for applications will go out this coming Monday and it's a slight revised change to what's in the paper. The deadline will be the Thursday, 11th of December. This is ahead slightly of where we were this time last year when expressions of interest for the programme were open until early January. Similarly, meetings have already been added to diaries for our working group and decision panels in early to mid-January. And one last point for noting, and to bring this update completely up to date, it isn't included in the report as Nestrans only received this last week, is the fact that we've had our feedback from Transport Scotland on our evaluation report on the 24-25 programme that we submitted to them in July. It was pleasing to say that our robust management and oversight of the programme, its overall performance, all the efforts of our partners and our consistent approach to ongoing matters across all the projects were praised by the Transport Scotland team. A national evaluation report formally encompassing this feedback will be shared publicly in the coming weeks, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Thank you. Having sat around this table for a good number of years, you see a lot of new projects coming forward, but unfortunately, some seem to drop off. It's in connection with People in Place, which was the active travel bridge in Banff. With particular issues, high deprivation, the public transport is almost non-existent in most days when buses break down. So there is a need to address these things. But I've looked through the progress report, and I'm seeing no update on that. I'll come to the 947 upgrade later on in the progress report. But why is that not included, considering Aberdeenshire Council put a lot of resources, time is a huge resource, and studies, but it just seems to have disappeared.
Martin, give an update on that one, please.
Thank you, through the chair. Yeah, Councillor Cox, it's quite right. It's not disappeared. It's just kind of waiting an outcome of a funding application. I know you've been told that for a good number of months now, but I think, well, the funding application's only been a good number of months. But yeah, I think we're in discussion with Transport Scotland just now on that, and we'll hope to share news with our elected members soon on that. And once we get some clarity on it, and hopefully we would provide a more positive update we have in recent months.
Through the chair, but my point is it's not in here, and it has been a project that we've been working on, so it should be in here with that update rather than having to request it. So why is it not in a report? Because if you do go forward with an application, they will look at our recommendations and program go, where did this come from? We've got to keep that traction going in terms of keeping it up there. As I say, there's a lot of stuff coming through, for example, bike hires, all these things. Well, if you don't have a safe route for bikes, what comes first, the bike or the safe route? And certainly in terms of public transport, major issues getting access to healthcare because it's negligible.
Sorry, switched it off. It's not in this report because it's not currently an active Nestrans project. It's an Aberdeenshire one. That may change. It's been updated via the bulletin report, strategic transport update, which occasionally goes to ISC. So it's still in that report, Councillor Cox. It's not in this one because Nestrans currently aren't funding any work in it just now.
Can I just say also this specific report on People in Place is for the behaviour change aspect, which is a separate funding from the Active Travel Infrastructure Fund, which was the infrastructure elements which Transport Scotland have been sitting on. So with the report before you is focused very much on that behaviour change programme funding that we get from Transport Scotland, and we are waiting a formal update on the applications for the Active Travel Infrastructure Fund, the design element of which was the Banff Bridge element as well. So the two different fundings, and this report specifically is on the behaviour change element of funding we get from Transport Scotland.
Yeah, but it's not in the report. I mean, the reports indicates where some of the funding resources come into. If we're looking at strategic transport, there should be some recognition of that. I've made my point several times, but as I say, if it's not there, if we don't promote it, whether it's supported in kind through Nestrans or whatever, it'll give us challenges to try and get money from Transport Scotland. Thank you.
I'm really glad, Paul, that you mentioned that, because I was looking at that the jigsaw pieces of page 181, and I did wonder why everyday behaviours was had a red line round it than the others, and I think that's probably the reason why. And of course there are several projects that Aberdeen City Council is doing that are not in here either, because they're not Nestrans projects, I guess. So it was just to reassure John that, you know, that is just the way the cookie crumbles, and it may well be that if it is a Nestrans project, it would come, we'd look at it here, but at the moment it's a Shire one. So you wouldn't want to see all our projects, I don't think either, to be honest, or maybe here for the rest of the week.
I do come into Aberdeen quite a bit, so yes, I'd be very interested to know where all them.
No, and I'm sure we'll speak about this more, Chair, when it comes to the workshop, because it goes to the heart of what Nestrans is about. And you're absolutely right that it is about those bigger partnership agreements and partnership working and strategic outlook, and so yeah, it's excellent.
John, just a quick question. The chap that was from Transport Scotland, I've forgotten his name, he mentioned going towards a 3-year funding cycle. Has that been mentioned any or developed since the meeting?
Yeah, Chair, it was David Kernahan from the Active Travel team. He everything is still now single year funding. There are plans, and I think there's a pilot in another business area that is looking towards multi-year funding, but as it stands, and certainly for the immediate future, everything's still immediate. One single year funding.
Yeah, thanks. Disappointed you didn't mention international penguin racing though.
I'll quickly jump in on that before Sandra comes in. It's just on the multi-year funding as well, just with slightly politics hat on. As I said, with the election next year, nobody can give guarantees of funding beyond that because they don't know who will be in power. So after that, it's usually when you're kind of hopeful for these, when you've got a spell without any elections, that there's probably a bit more of a scope to give that guarantee. Well, but we'll find out after that. I think I'll take it in Sandra now.
Yeah, I was going to ask about Transport Scotland themselves, and have they grown to be able to deal with all these projects coming up? Because you know, it's been such a fast learning curve for community groups, for yourself, John. I mean, it's just amazing what has happened and has been empowered to happen in the northeast around this particular funding stream, because it did come late. It did come as a bit of a surprise, and so on. And have Transport Scotland themselves caught up with what's going on, not just here in the northeast, but right across Scotland?
You, Chair. I think I can only speak for the Active Travel team, one of whom was presented at Ellen, and certainly from their perspective, the People in Place programme, and again, I'm only speaking referring to the People in Place as opposed to the Active Travel Infrastructure Fund, it's enabled them to be already even in its second year, back more to being policy and strategy makers as opposed to administrators of grant funding. And given the Audit Scotland report that came out in January, their oversight was mentioned in that fairly robustly. So that's the experience of the active travel team. It's allowed them to be back at the setting the direction of travel, I suppose, and how we go about it.
I'm not seeing any more hands. We're happy to agree the report and its recommendations. Yep, thank you. We'll move on now. Item 6.1, the Real Matters update. I'm hoping to take that as read and just ask if we have any questions. I'm not. Oh, Sandra.
Yeah, I saw that the £20,000 mentioned in the report, and I noted that in one of the previous reports that we were in 23-24, it was 3,600 that Nestrans had put forward towards that pot. I was asking myself what we've actually got out over the last few years from that. I'm not suggesting for a minute that we don't keep going with the East Coast main line, but first of all, I was going to ask, is it all the councils from Aberdeen all the way down to London that pay, or is it just Aberdeen as far as the border, you know, that pay? And if so, why are we paying 15% of the 20,000?
So the East Coast Mainline Authority, so East Coast Mainline Authority was almost a grouping that took in some of the major regions all the way from London up to Edinburgh and then forward from there. In Scotland, it was just the 4 regional transport partnerships who had an interest in that, who were asked to put forward to the sum of £2,000, whatever, £3,000 per year. And that was Tactran, Nestrans, Sestran, and Hightrans as well. The issue that they've had for the last few years is they no longer have that body to act as the secretariat, which used to be one of the North East England authorities. So they're sitting on that form, that funding there. So I think when it is active, the Scottish RTPs pay a proportionate amount into that. It has been dormant for the last few years. We have not put forward our funding over the last few years because it is dormant. There have been recent meetings around how they might take that one forward, and if that isn't resolved, then I would imagine there'll be a rebasing of that redistribution of that £200,000 going forward. Certainly, from my perspective as a director, my principal interest is on Network Rail and Transport Scotland's project to do with the journey time improvements, capacity improvements, track improvements between Aberdeen and the Central Belt, and that remains my principal focus on this. However, we cannot, you know, if we are thinking about the wider energy transition, we cannot be blind to the linkages we do have to North East England in terms of Newcastle, that area as well. So there is that does remain a relevance at this particular time. So the meetings are still ongoing as to how they resolve themselves. So I'll give that update when that is coming at the moment. But just to say, at the moment, we're not contributing any money at the moment. This is just legacy funding that's going forward on that basis.
Yeah, I'm really pleased to see that there's been positive discussions with Network Rail about Interstation, and I hope that they can, whatever it is that's dealing with that, and I hope they can, you know, keep going relatively quickly, because it is much needed and it'd be really good to get it done. And this is really the only way we're going to get it done. There's not any hope of anything else. So the sooner the better. So I'm glad it's moving on.
Not seeing any more hands, so we're happy to agree the update. Thank you very much. 6.2, climate change reporting. Again, we're going to take that as read and just go to any questions if we have any. And that would be agreed as well then. In that case, we'll agree that and move on to item 7, the progress report. And again, taking as read, do we have any questions? Happy to agree that as well. Yep, and final item, publications and consultations. Do we have any questions? So, yes, publication consultations. Have we got any questions on that? Yep. Trying to go back to the progress report very quickly, just since I think we just.
So that might be some discussion. I kind of touched on it earlier on in terms of A947. Appreciate there was some work done at a junction, so it should have been a roundabout or something else because it's still a bad junction and that's where the accidents are. Resurfacing didn't address it. However, we've spent, Aberdeenshire Council has spent a lot of money at studies on the A947, and I'm not seeing a list of other projects coming down. Maybe Sandra will correct me, this is maybe more in Aberdeenshire. But again, I think it is important that these things are on the agenda as a strategic approach. A947, very important, a lot of heavy goods. Sometimes it's nose to tail all the way from Macduff to Aberdeen. There's no overtaking facilities. Carried out the study, so we'd like to see some further action on that. There's no response today. Quite happy for that to be deferred, Chair.
Thank you, Chair. I think is that working then? Yeah. Yeah, the A947 members of working group has been sat not meeting for some time now due to the resource issues that we've updated. I've been keeping the chair of the group updated on that. We've met regularly and we're hoping to give an update to the rest of the group shortly on what we hope to do with that. There is still been work happening on the A947 based on what the action plan is, particularly that junction you mentioned, Councillor Cox. The data around that junction showed the instance and the collisions happening away from the junction, hence the reason why the resurfacing was carried out. The junction itself there's no evidence to back up an upgrade to it, and that's what came through the work. But again, I think this is an Aberdeenshire specific thing. It's nothing that we can pick up. It's probably part of the workshop as well as what gets included in these Nestrans reports and what doesn't. I think we've picked up on that through this meeting so far.
Yeah, it's really interesting now that I live on the A947, which I haven't done before. It's interesting. The bus service is appalling. There's plenty of buses, but getting to where you want to go on time is tough going. You know, they're very slow, and because they're coming such a long way down the A947, they're coming right, some in Inverness, Elgin, through Banff. They've got quite convoluted routes, and you do have to plan ahead so you take an earlier bus if you want to get somewhere. And I know a lot of people just go to Inverurie and go from there because it's more reliable. So it would be great if there's something we could look at to improve traffic times, I guess, because it'll be all traffic that's held up, as you say, not just the buses.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think we've got the route improvement strategy there. We need to get the resource behind it. That's simply it.
And I'm sure this could be added to the work. We can bring it up as well at the workshop we're having shortly. Do you have any more questions at all? Right. I think, and then back just final checking the publications and consultations. Didn't see any questions the last time. Just going once, going twice. Right. In that case, that's run out of agenda. So thank you very much, and I will see you very shortly for the workshop we're doing. Thank you.